Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur, where we sit down with visionaries, trailblazers, and entrepreneurs and discover why and how they do what they do. We'll get the backstory, plus plenty of life and business lessons along the way. Here's your host, Matt Brauning.
Welcome back to The Driven Entrepreneur one more time. If you're brand new to the show, I just want to welcome you. I'm super excited that you're here with us today. Hey, make sure you check out our back catalog. If you're listening live right now on the radio, go anywhere where you find podcasts, The Driven Entrepreneur, and there are back episodes, hundreds of them, no paywall, totally free, some amazing interviews, just like this week. Now, I am going to get into the mind this week of not a comedian, although we're going to talk about comedy. We're going to get into the mind of a comedy producer. We're going to get into the mind of a promoter. Now, I would identify myself in the entrepreneur space as a promoter as well. I've been producing live events for the last 15 years in seminars, conferences, in a teaching, coaching aspect. But I haven't done a lot of entertainment events. And our next guest has done a ton of entertainment events. So my question for you, pay attention, is what do Jay Leno, Dana Carvey, Bob Saget, and Garry Shandling all have in common? Well, they've all worked for Mr. Scott Edwards, my guest this week. He's been the owner of a chain of comedy clubs and has worked with the very best and has a ton of firsthand experiences we're going to share. Super excited about this. He uses communication entrepreneur skills that he's learned over the years to grow his company to 125 employees. Plus, he's a little bit of a serial entrepreneur with a couple of restaurants, art galleries, and even a submarine? Am I reading that right? A submarine? Well, it's been quite a ride for him. Scott, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hey, great, Matt. It's exciting to be here. I've been listening to your shows, man. You rock it out there. You've had great guests. You share important information. And just to be on here, it's very exciting. And yes, it was a submarine.
All right. Well, I mean, we can't really go much further than that, bud. So we got to start with the submarine. How and when did you get your hands on a submarine? I think why is probably the first question I think of.
Well, unlike a couple of your other guests, I, as a serial entrepreneur, had an itch, and I would open up some type of new business every year. And I was operating my chain of comedy clubs, and I was doing really well. We caught that magic comedy wave in 1980. When I first opened my club, it was the 12th comedy club in the entire United States. And by about 6 years later, there were like Starbucks on every corner. So 12? I did pretty well.
Like 1, 2?
Yeah.
What state were you in?
In the country, California.
Whoa. I had no idea. 1980 was that rare. This wasn't a thing.
There was the Comedy Store and the Improv in L.A. There was a couple clubs in San Francisco, one in Boston, and then a couple Catch a Rising Star in New York, and then me, Laughs Unlimited. And we did well, made some money, and I invested in a company called Subsea Systems, and they have SNUBA, S-N-U-B-A. It's an underwater snorkeling thing all over the world. Still involved in that. Very fun business. But the owners, this was about 20 years ago, decided, hey, we could do a tourist submarine. And I helped them build the first one, and we launched it in Hawaii. It was very successful. It was called the Nautilus One. And I said, I want to own one of those. And I got some people together, and we built another submarine, and we launched it in Monterey, California, which is a great place. There's a beautiful aquarium there. Always lots to see, otters and seals and sea lions. However, it's also very cold water, and it turned out, even though we gave it about a year and a half, that was one of my big losing companies because there was an algae bloom issue that blocked the windows, and we'd have to pay a diver to keep the windows clean all the time, and it just got too expensive. The submarine was eventually sold to the Wrigley family from Wrigley Gum, and they still operate it in Catalina, an island off of Los Angeles.
Yeah, so I've scubaed on Catalina. I actually just golfed there a couple months ago.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
There's a submarine called the Nautilus 2 that runs out of Catalina, and that used to be mine.
That was yours.
used to run in Monterey, California. But it was one of my big failures. But boy, what a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and what a story. Like, I don't know, how many people have you met that have owned a submarine? Maybe more than I have, because I'm at about one right now.
Yeah, I think I know 4. But,
yeah,
it was one of those things that seemed like a lot of fun. What was nice about the money I made at Laughs Unlimited, it allowed me to do other things that I had an itch and a creative angst to do. So I opened a couple restaurants. I had a couple art galleries. And one of the more fun, successful things was for about 5.5, 6 years, I owned a beach shack on the big island of Hawaii, what that was great was I could fly to Hawaii, hang out on the beach with all the semi-clad bikini girls, and it was a tax write-off.
Everybody's dream.
Yes, it was
a vacation.
Yeah, definitely. And so it was things like that the success of Laughs Unlimited allowed me to do.
How old were you the last time you got a paycheck from someone besides, you or your own companies?
There was about 12 years ago, and for a period of about 8 years after the comedy clubs and a travel agency and a few other things, I actually, my wife wanted a little financial stability in my life. And even though I was on commission, I was getting a salary plus commission from the Ford Motor Company. I was a fleet director.
Wow.
So,
that's a departure a little bit.
Yeah, that was my whole thing, Matt, was customer service. Ever since my first company when I was 17, my gift to the world is I'm really good at sales and customer service. And the secret there is to ask the right questions and then shut up and listen. And that led to a lot of success, including with the Ford Motor Company as a fleet director.
Where do you think the skill set of listening got developed in you? Was this something that you kind of always just were good at, like a musical ear? Or is it something that maybe growing up with, mom or dad or, the environment, did you have to adapt and learn to be a good listener? Where do you think that came from?
That's a good question, Matt, and the first time it's been asked. So
I appreciate that.
I came from a family. I'm sorry.
I listen.
Yeah, right. Good for you. I came from a broken family. My parents divorced when I was 10. There was some pressure to bring some money into the family. So I was working from about age 12 on. My first outside, paycheck job, I was 15. And it was in those early days, I was working pizza parlors. And back then, they weren't nice big family places. They were basically bars that sold food. And I was surrounded by older people. And in that day and age, to date myself, a lot of Vietnam vets. I was old enough to be in the draft for 2 years, but luckily I didn't have to go to Vietnam. But I was working with a lot of the vets, and they always had stories and always talked about the importance of, making something yourself. And I listened to those stories and been listening ever since. A quick example, Matt, if you don't mind. My first company was called A&A Restripe. I was 17 years old, and I was a night janitor at a motel. I was cleaning toilets and buffing floors, and I overheard 2 guys in the bar talking about striping parking lots on the weekends for extra cash. And I immediately went out and went to the Yellow Pages, which for people under 50, that was a big book where you'd find companies. I would go out and talk to the owners of other striping or construction companies and ask them how they got into business, what they charged, and what they did. And people love talking about themselves. It makes them feel like a success. And I just soaked that all in, got a couple buddies, and we opened up our own small construction company when we were 17. And that company is still operating today. So it was back then that I realized that I didn't know everything. I didn't go to college. I wasn't a good student. If I was going to learn, it was going to be from others.
So when you say learn from others, you're talking peers, friends, people that have been successful before you. So when you were young, and this is where I kind of go with this too, when you were even younger than 17, You talked about kind of that entrepreneur itch as a teenager. What were you like as a young kid? Everyone dreams to be something usually. For me, I wrote a note when I was 6. Some of my audience have heard this. I wanted to run away from home to be an ice cream man because I figured I can't imagine a better job than that, right? Literally work and live. I thought they lived inside the ice cream truck. And then the next one I wanted to do was to own Toy City, like a Toys R Us, because I thought, again, what a great business to have. But that was what I wanted to do when I was a kid. What were you dreaming of when you were a kid? Did you think you'd own a business or do something like that? Or were you on a track to, go to college or be an accountant or something?
Like I said, I came from kind of a lower middle class family. So the goal was to go to college. And I'm not even sure where it came from, but my dream at those ages, 6 and 8 and 10, I was always working towards and reading about being an oceanographer. I just loved the idea of the ocean and didn't know anything about it. And I thought that would be a great way to make a living on the sea. The problem was I was growing up in Sacramento, which couldn't be any more landlocked.
Right.
So no experience near the ocean. Since then, I've become a certified diver and, as you know, owned a submarine and got involved in SNUBA. So I've been around the ocean a lot as an adult. But as a kid, it was more just a dream.
Reading the books and seeing it on television and that kind of thing.
Right. I would research it
Kids, there wasn't any YouTube back then. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, he wasn't watching YouTube videos. No,
there was nothing. There was some black and white TV and some books. The World Book Encyclopedia for anybody that remembers. But the listening part, I think, was maybe God's gift to me to survive. It wasn't something I thought about. It kind of just came naturally. My dad wasn't around, so I didn't really have any mentors. I was kind of forging my own path. And I want to share something with your listeners because these are all entrepreneurs. There's really no original ideas out there. Now, that sounds really harsh, but what I have found is that there's somebody out there doing what you want to do. And if you want to do it, go for it and find those people, ask them about it, shut up and listen, and then do it.
So when it comes to comedy, when you opened up the club and it was, the 12th club in the United States, there was only 12 of them. Did you have promoter mentors? Did you have someone that you had met or found? Is it like a good old boys club back then? Is there an association? How do you get involved moving forward with owning a comedy club? Or is it, was that your own advice? Or did you just go, you know what, screw it, I'm going to start it, and you rented the space and you figured it out as you went? What was the story of that?
I'm following the same path of the other companies I opened, Matt. What I did was I was on vacation in Los Angeles. My dad had a great sense of humor, and he said, hey, you got to go check out this place called the Comedy Store. They had a little satellite room by UCLA in Westwood, California. And I was on vacation with my then girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, soon-to-be ex-wife. And we went into the comedy club. And comedy was not really known at the time. Like I said, there was just a few clubs in the whole country. And I had a blast. I saw Dave Coulier from Full House. I saw Sandra Bernhardt, a number of other acts. And I had so much fun. I said to myself, Sacramento, which is where I'm from, needs this entertainment. This is exciting and fun. So I stayed after the show and asked questions and started talking to the comics and collecting phone numbers, came back to Sacramento and quit my job, and I went bankrupt and cleared my financial deck, and then went back down to LA and did what I just told you. I went to a couple comedy clubs. I met the managers or the owners, and I asked a lot of questions. I met other comics. Dave Coulier was nice enough to introduce me to Bob Saget.
Now, is that Uncle Joey? Is that who Dave is?
Yeah. Joey from Full House. He introduced me to Bob Saget.
Shout out to Dave.
And then he introduced me to Garry Shandling, who introduced me to George Wallace, and it went on and on. And what was interesting was one of the reasons I had such a success with Laughs Unlimited is that these comics that are now famous, they weren't famous then,
sure,
were my mentors. I asked them, what makes a good comedy club? Oh, well, you want it to look like this, and you want to start the shows like this. Well, what do I pay the comics? Well, they're all
as much as you can.
Right. They would all say, well, they're going to want as much as they can. But they knew that I was sincere and that I was going to be opening up a business that would eventually make them money. So they gave me honest advice. You could get an opening act for $100, $150 a week, and a headliner you're maybe paying $800 a week. This was back in the 80s. So they were really my guides, my mentors. And I think one of the things that made me such a success was they taught me that to be a really successful club, respect the talent, right? A lot of these clubs treated the comics like this week's meat, right? Just, coming through and didn't give them any respect. And I looked at each of these guys as a gift. Man, you've got this talent. And for a couple bucks, you're willing to let me share that talent to my audience. Man, thank you so much. And I treated him well, and I put him up in nice places. I didn't pay him great. I was pretty cheap, but I treated him well, and that brought people back. Jerry Seinfeld was working for me regularly, and he had to cancel because he got a TV show called The Seinfeld Chronicles, turned out to be The Seinfeld Show. And he liked and respected me so much that after he did the first season of the Seinfeld Chronicles, because he had canceled a date, he came back and worked for the same money that I had contracted him for 8 months earlier before he was on TV.
Wow.
To make up for the gig that he owed me. And here is this lowly club in Sacramento. I've got the star of this TV sitcom on my stage, and I was paying him, a couple grand instead of, he gets probably 50 grand a show now. So,
wow.
Jerry, I respected Jerry. He respected me. And that's the kind of guy he was. He came back and worked for the money he negotiated.
Well, see, what a great story and plug for a guy like Seinfeld too, to say, I'm guessing this wasn't an isolated incident. It's not, I'm guessing this wasn't the only club that he ever behaved that way with. Can you speak a little bit to reputation? Now I've booked a lot of speakers on my seminars and stages over the years, and you've booked probably 10 times more comics and different talents on your stages. Could you speak a bit to reputation and kind of that talent promoter relationship? What I really enjoyed what you said was you listened to the talent and you treated them with respect and value. I think no matter what business you're in, whether it's your team members, your volunteers, your interns, even your clients to that point, there's a piece about listening and gaining knowledge from them. But it can also go on the other side. It can go too far, where if you're only listening to talent, right? What should I pay people? Oh, you could have talent tell you, well, you should give them all guaranteed contracts, this much money. And if you're only listening to your students, well, you should have the comfiest chairs and you should have the gourmet food and maybe you should. But I guess my point is when you're only listening to one source, it can be a little one-sided. How did you balance out, I guess my original question about reputation, right? When choosing which talent to bring. And then the follow-up is how did you balance out feedback and listening to talent versus kind of the other side of maybe the promoter side or, balancing their feedback?
Well, those are two questions, Matt, that are
correct.
Really,
sorry about that.
No, it's really important stuff. First off, as I mentioned, I did go to the comics and asked them, what makes a club successful to you? What do I need to do to succeed? Because I was a kid. I was 24 years old at the time, and I'd owned a couple companies, but I had not been in entertainment. And I'm not per se a funny guy. I'm a businessman. And what I did is I listened to the comics, but I also talked to other club owners and club managers. And that gave me that perspective of both sides. And what was interesting about the relationships that you asked about is that as much as I was, quote unquote, their friend, they never forgot that I was their boss. And that's what's interesting is that when you hold the purse strings and you own the company, even when you have a Jay Leno or a Harry Anderson or a Yakov Smirnoff or a Pat Paulson is experienced and they were older than me, famous people, they know that for the week that they're working for me, I'm paying them, I'm their boss. And so I'm respecting them, but they know, and I made it clear, I'm in charge. And so there's kind of a mutual respect. I'm respecting them for their talents and who they are and what they bring to my audience, but they're respecting the fact that if they don't do what I want, they're not getting paid. and so that's a bit of a hammer. When it comes to the various types of people and who to listen to and who not to, you're absolutely correct that you don't want to let people walk over you. So what I always say is ask the right questions, listen to the answers, but ultimately, as a business owner, it's your decision. It's your butt on the line. So you have to take all this information you gathered in and balance it with your own sensibilities, your own morals, your own goals, and decide what's the right path to take. That may be too long of an answer, but it really is important to build a relationship, whether it's a customer, a prospect, or a comic. You want to build a relationship of mutual respect. And once you have that, you can make things work. I can give you a great example of when it doesn't work. I'm sure you've heard of Bill Maher, the famous political comic. Very talented guy, very successful, could buy and sell me 10 times over. Very rich and wealthy at this point. But back in the day, Bill Maher was working for me, and basically he was an ass. And he went on stage on a Wednesday night and disrespected my audience and told them they were stupid because he was talking this highfalutin political stuff about DC and throwing out names of politicians. And the audience was like,
it's not funny because I don't know who you're talking about.
Exactly. So
I don't watch the news.
Right. So he stops halfway through his set, tells them how stupid they are and what a cowtown Sacramento is. And he walks off stage. And I got to tell you, he lost their respect. He lost my respect. And I fired his butt right then and there and sent him home without his pay. I mean, I paid him for the 2 nights he worked. But there's a guy that is very talented, makes a lot of money. He's way more successful than me. But at the time, he forgot that he was there for the audience. The audience wasn't there for him. And that led me to fire him. And coincidentally, Matt, he was one of only 2 people in the 21 history of my 3 clubs that I ever fired.
He was one of, you said the only one or one of 3?
One of 2.
One of 2. Wow.
So 2 people in the history of 3 clubs, a show 6 nights a week, 2 on the weekends. You're talking thousands and thousands of shows, hundreds and hundreds of comics. And Bill Maher was only one of 2 guys that got his butt fired midweek because he forgot his place.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty strong to say. Now, what level of fame, at that point, is he not famous yet? Or does he have a little bit of clout? Is he on the way?
Yeah, he had already done some TV, but he didn't have his own show. He's had his own show since. And as I preface this, he's very funny and he's a very talented guy and he's incredibly smart. But there's a point where you were talking about what are these people like personality wise, and he was just arrogant and it didn't fit the type. What's great was I was the boss. If I didn't like you and I didn't want to work with you, guess what? I don't have to. It's good to be the king.
Well, and, especially early on, right, when this is supply and demand too. Comics are upcoming. There's a lot more than 12, yet there's only 12 comedy clubs. So I'm guessing in the beginning, would it make sense that you had a little bit more of the pick of the litter, so to speak? And tell me about how did that start changing over the years, right? You said 21 years in comedy. How did the business evolve and change from a promoter's standpoint?
Well, it's a good question. Again, Matt, you seem to know your work.
Hey, I told you I don't think we were on or off air, but I respect stand-up comedy so much. That's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I made a point. So when you think about any career, whether it's a lawyer, a doctor, or a construction guy, there's a path. You start off in the beginning and you're getting education at college or high school and then junior college and then you go into a master's program and maybe you become this or that. In the entertainment world, you have these small kind of open mic clubs bars that let you get on stage and do 3 minutes. And that's like going to high school, right? And then you have the discos that converted into comedy clubs, and they had comedy maybe 2 nights a week, and it wasn't really run professionally. And that's like maybe going to junior college, but you're getting on stage, you're learning your craft. I decided early on that I was going to be what's called an A room. So an A-level room, the headliners were already professionals. They were making good money. They were expected to fill 45 minutes to an hour of time on stage, which is a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah. You ever try to go on stage and fill 3 minutes? Imagine doing an hour.
Sure. I mean, 3 to 5 minutes could be several bits, right?
Oh, yeah. No, on a laughs per minute ratio, when you're trying to get,
explain to us laughs per minute real quick.
Sorry?
Explain to everyone laughs per minute real quick. And does that matter really? Or is it just a thing you learn in school?
Laughs per minute is a guide that comics use as writers, that if they write a 5-minute bit or a 2-minute bit or a 1-minute bit, they want to get so many laughs per minute. And it's just a loose guide. As a producer, it wasn't something that was extremely important to me, as long as they presented the end result, which is an entertained audience.
Sure.
I'll give you 2 quick examples. Someone like Stephen Wright,
right,
who would just go up and it was just joke, 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 joke. He would do 5 jokes in a minute, or
very short setups, very short punchlines.
Then you had one of the most talented, and I think my most favorite comic, and I've worked with thousands, very talented comic actor. His name's Larry Miller. If you were to Google him, you'd go, oh, him. He's done over hundreds of movies. Very, very funny guy. But as a stand-up comic, and he's out of New York, he could tell a 20-minute story. And the laughs per minute weren't that high, but people were riveted for the story, laughing every few minutes. And then at the end, huge explosion of laughter because of his presentation. So there's 2 examples that were both very successful, but the laughs per minute ratio was really different. It's like a lot of jobs. It's what you bring in the end result that really matters. Going back to the scenario, I was in A room, and then if you were really good in an A room, you might get seen at the Comedy Store or the Improv in LA, and a TV producer or director might pick you, give you what I call the golden ticket, and offer you a sitcom. So I looked at Laughs Unlimited as kind of the college of entertainment. We were prepping you to stardom.
That's amazing. And I don't want to go on without mentioning this. The A room. I talk in entrepreneur coaching a lot about what I call the jewelry store effect. So you can make a necklace, and it's an amazing necklace, and it's the same quality as your competitor's necklace, but the case that you put it in tells the people how much value there is. Did you put it in Walmart's case or Tiffany's case? In your case, we're talking, is like B room, C room, A room, or whatever the terms are. Did you just decide in the beginning, I'm going to build an A room comedy clubs? That means that dictates my decision making, right? If you follow me on this, like what kind of curtains will we have? What do our chairs look like? You're going to probably go a little higher level table, a little higher level drink menu, et cetera, et cetera. Is this something you just decide and then fulfill? Or is it something in the industry you have to kind of work your way into? Like, would you have, looking back, do high school, community college, metaphorically, and then get into an A room? Or do you just decide, I'm going to make an A room, damn it, because I'm going to make it?
Yeah, I made the decision early on that I wanted to present A-level comedy. When I first started, I had no money. I had negotiated the use of a restaurant banquet room for free for the first year, just to get to learn and to start my company. And what made it an A room was that I fell into, quite accidentally, people like Dave Coulier, Bob Saget, Jerry Seinfeld, and Garry Shandling, people like that. And they made my room an A room because the level of quality of the comedy that I was presenting. However, after a year and a half in that banquet room, I built and designed my own full-time comedy club. And that's where I had the ability to build a club that was as good, and I think in many cases better than even the clubs in LA were at the time, because it was built for comedy. It wasn't a converted disco or a converted bowling alley or banquet room. I built a club to present the best comedy in the best box, as you said, best display that I could.
That's amazing. I just love the ability to just go after the target market and decide what grade you're going to be. I think that applies to so many business owners. Take landscaping, right? Or pick, random whatever industry. And you decide, do you want to mow mansions or do you want to mow, the small rinky-dink houses? And I just can't tell you how many times, and you've probably seen this, entrepreneurs, they kind of almost complaining in a way, and there's not enough business or my clients don't have enough money. And what they don't realize is they're actually catering to a particular demographic. And sometimes it's as easy as decide who you want to cater to, build your business and your culture and your values and your value proposition around that, and then just go to town. Now, it's important that if you build an A-room comedy club, you got to fill it with talent. You got to fill it with some famous headliners. You need to actually deliver the goods. How important is recognition, meaning like an A-list name, versus just good talent? Like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have an A-list talent or an A-list name that is pretty darn good? Or would you rather have like raw talent that's hilarious and the audience loves, but no one knows who they are?
That's a great question, Matt. In comedy is my world of influence was the time. There were a group of entertainers that had already gotten the golden ticket or were already quote unquote name acts.
Yep.
And yes, I made a point of bringing in a known name about once a quarter, about every 3 months, just to get the free press. It was good for advertising and the audiences. It brought in new people every time. But I found my success came from developing acts.
So you build talent.
Right. For every Robin Williams and Garry Shandling or Pat Paulson out there, there's 10 guys that are really funny that just didn't get that golden ticket. That doesn't mean they're not hilarious. They can do an hour of material. The audience leaves exhausted and full of joy. And what I would do is, and this was different than a lot of clubs at the time, I would bring those guys in every few months so that they built an audience in my club, so that when I marketed them, the people that already saw them would tell their friends, hey, this guy, Steve Bruner, is clean and funny and better than anybody you've seen on TV. You got to come see him. Well, no one's heard the name Steve Bruner.
Sure.
But if you saw him, then you'd tell your friends, and your friends would tell their friends, and you're building an audience. And after a couple of years, Steve Bruner I would put out his name in advertising, or he would build his own list and send out, hey, I'm going to be at Laughs Unlimited on this date. And guess what? We're sold out.
So creating a headliner, and I wish we had time to get into this as well. I think it's so fascinating. Remember I said the other industry I respect so much is pro wrestling, and people always look at me sideways like, how do you respect that? And it's like, well, they work harder than just about anybody. But it's such an art when you look at the promoter aspect, which I get into kind of wrestling history, and you watch, the Hulk Hogan's or the John Cena's or the Stone Cold Steve Austin's or the Rock's. The Rock was homegrown. Stone Cold Steve Austin was homegrown. They weren't headliners until they were, right? Somebody had to put them out as a no-name talent and build them. And it's cool to see that you do both. But you definitely would lean more towards that homegrown talent. I do the same thing with speakers at seminars. I love it. I think that's brilliant, Scott.
I got a great story for you. So I got the chance to work with a young comic who could do impressions, was very funny, out of the Bay Area. His name was Dana Carvey.
I think I heard of him.
Yeah, he's been around, and he was I worked him regularly. He first started off as a featured act, worked into being a headliner. He was very funny, so he headlined many times. He also was into music. He and his brother had a band, and I brought his whole band in for a week, and they were playing the song Choppin' Broccoli live on stage a good 3 years before it appeared on Saturday Night Live and became a huge comedy cult hit. Of course, depending on the age of your audience, they may not remember the name Dana Carvey or Choppin' Broccoli, but this guy worked for me all the time. We built him up as an A headliner. And after a Saturday night gig, we're sitting in a jacuzzi together having drinks. And he goes, man, I just had a phone call from Lorne Michaels, and I'm flying to New York in a couple days to audition for Saturday Night Live. And of course, the rest is famous. He got Saturday Night Live, did it for a couple of years, and then ended up doing movies and he has his own movies.
Oh, he's Wayne's World. Come on, working alongside Mike Myers.
Yeah,
the church woman, the church girl
commercial together. Yeah. And what's great is Dana was one of my just regular A-room headliners, and he got the golden ticket. He got that phone call. I was with him. He was both excited and a little scared and nervous. Lorne Michaels just called me. He was a god in those days.
Oh, this is the guy. I mean, he gave the golden ticket to Chevy Chase and Eddie Murphy and Jim Belushi, and I mean, the list goes on. Every famous actor.
Yeah. And Saturday Night Live had just started going in the late 70s, early 80s. And so,
and this is 86, right? 86 is when he joined, I believe.
Yeah. And what's amazing is he'd already been working for me for several years. And I happened to share that moment when he got the golden ticket. The same with Bob Saget and Dave Coulier. They were working for me before they got Full House, and all of a sudden they're household names. But I also, to go back to what we were saying, I brought in famous people in the sense that I worked Harry Anderson, who was the magician on Cheers, and then had his own show
Judge
called
on Night Court.
Pat
I loved
Paulson
Harry Anderson.
Yeah, he was great, and became a good friend. Pat Paulson from who always perennial running for president, was already famous. We became good friends. He came to the club as a regular. Seinfeld, here's what happens. Once you get the golden ticket, it's difficult for a room my size to get you back. Jerry did that show that he owed me. But once Dana got Saturday Night Live, or Bob and Coulier came back and worked for me, but Saget went on the path of fortune. It's very difficult to get him back into a club my size.
Oh, but, sure.
I did like doing concerts. I did 2 TV series that I produced, and I did a couple concerts, and those concerts were with Jay Leno, and he was already a household name. It was before he got the Tonight Show, but he had done the Tonight Show several times. And Jay and he used to work for me when I had the club, became good friends. And he would come in once a year and do a concert for me. And he was the highest paid act I ever had. I paid him $15,000 for one night of work. And for me, that was a huge investment and risk. But I'll
bet he would draw seats, wouldn't he?
Oh, we sold out we had the Convention Center Theater here in Sacramento, 2,200 seats, and we would sell it out 2 times in a night.
Yeah.
And I made money.
Yeah,
but it was still a big risk. I mean, if nobody had showed, I had guaranteed him $15,000. But
did you guys ever, just sorry to interrupt, but in the comedy industry, did you ever like share parts of the houses? Like, would you have a deal where it's like, hey, you're the main event or the headliner, so you're going to get X percentage of the house? Or was it always a fee per night based on your where you are in the card?
Yeah, 99% of the time it was a contracted fee that I arranged and negotiated with the entertainment. There were a couple cases where guys that were trying to build their own reputation would negotiate part of the house deal, get 50% of the door.
Yeah.
And then they would do their own marketing.
Yeah.
And I would keep 50% of the door to cover my nut. My profit came from selling food and drinks. And they took the 50% of the door, which was usually more than I would have contracted for. So
but they also got out and hustled their butt off and marketed and flyered and got their friends to come.
Yeah, they were in charge of bringing in the crowd. They were taking on the responsibility of marketing. But for example, there's a great comic. He never got the golden ticket, but he's one of the best road comics out there. His name's Don Friesen. He won the San Francisco comedy competition twice. He's the only guy to ever do that. And he likes promoting his own concerts. So he would do house deals. There's another comic, Bob Duback, who's very funny, produces his own shows because they feel that they not only can control, they're sharing that job as producer, so they can control the environment or the box, as you said, that they're going to be showcased in. And if they do well, they reap some of the financial benefits.
But they're taking on a bit of that risk as well. It's interesting, in my industry, I didn't think of myself like this until recent years, but I kind of would do both, right? I've had a lot of speakers on, but primarily I would also act as the main talent at a seminar. So I would be the promoter to get butts and seats and to put people on and contract the hotels. But then I'm also the main teacher, speaker, educator, whatever you want to say. Scott, this has been really, really fun. As we wind down here, I want to talk about your book, which I think is such a resource for people. Tell me about the idea behind Be a Stand-Up Comic or Just Look Like One. This is not a book about how to be funny. This is a book about how to be successful in the industry, which I know we can pull parallels into just about every industry that needs promotion. Is that true?
Yes, exactly. And originally the book was called Be a Stand-Up Comic. And then somebody came out with the same title literally 2 months before us. And we had to pivot real quick. And we added, or Just Look Like One. And the concept of the book was, it was written in, it's been around a little bit. It was written in the late 80s. But as I mentioned, the comedy wave was so huge, and people were seeing people like Robin Williams and Bob Saget and Garry Shandling and Seinfeld getting TV shows and becoming what they thought were overnight successes. They didn't realize the years of work that people put into to quote unquote become an overnight success.
Absolutely. Overnight success in a quick 15 years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So my partner and I, Bob Stobiner, we wrote a book called Be a Stand-Up Comic or Just Look Like One. And basically the first half of the book was telling you all the crap you'd have to go through to be a professional. And the idea was to kind of chase away some of the wannabes and take the dreamers and take them from that dream to a reality. This is what the job really entails and what you're going to have to deal with. And then the second half of the book, we figured if you're still reading and you're still performing, you're serious. Okay, now you got to buckle down. This is what you're going to do. And we're going to take you from an open mic or not making any money to being a feature or a headliner and maybe making several $1,000s a night. So follow this path and we'll help you become a pro.
Scott, I'm going to go get my book right now. Guys, you can check out Scott's book at scottscomedystuff.com. Now, I like to read books before I recommend them. I have not read yours, but I do know you. And I mean, with 21 years experience, plus all the other entrepreneur endeavors, I'm super excited. I really genuinely am, Scott, to dive into this. Because again, like I've done stand-up comedy classes. I take acting classes currently right now. And I don't have any dream to act or, be a headline stand-up comic, but I know that infusing comedy, bringing promotional skills, understanding, headliner versus opening acts and networking and referrals and all the things you talk about in your book, understanding that is going to help me in my current business to grow and get further along.
Well, you know what's nice? You know what's nice, Matt, is you have a connection because as soon as we get done, I'll send you a free copy of the book.
Whoa!
But for everybody,
okay, I'm in. This is exciting, Scott.
But for everybody else, go to www.scottscomedystuff.com and you'll find all the various products and my book that are available to anybody that's interested. And even if you don't want to become a professional comic, there's gems of information that will help you in sales, in management, in organization to help you follow your dream.
Very well said. Scott Edwards, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I sure appreciate it.
Oh, Matt, it's been great. Thank you so much, sir. Continued success.
All right, guys, that's the show this week. Wow, we had a little bit of a marathon episode. I hope you stuck with it because you're hearing my voice right now. But Scott Edwards, you can follow Scott on social media. You can go on LinkedIn. You can follow Scott on Facebook, of course. He's got also his comedy stuff. Let me just find that. It is Facebook is Laughs History, facebook.com/Laughs History. So you see a page devoted to the laughing comedy business. But check out Scott Edwards. And then, of course, you want to grab his book. He's also got a really cool, like a comedy class and a bunch of other great resources. You can find everything at scottscomedystuff.com. Thanks for listening this week. I'll be back next week with another driven entrepreneur as per usual. And I don't know how many times I can say driven in an hour, but get out there this weekend and stay driven. See you next week. Bye-bye.